Jesse, is this seat taken?
No, come on in, Greg.
All right, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Oh, doing well. Yeah. Wasn't that such a great week last week?
Oh, so good, so good.
Yeah.
The house was packed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was really fun because I got to see a lot of my academy friends. It was a good day.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I don't think it hurt anything that we didn't have to, do the stacks of 7 thing at the end of the service and stack all our chairs up.
Yes.
And that was awesome.
Yes, it made me feel like we were finally home.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
Speaking of home, did you see that guy who, I guess he's been gone, he must have come home to visit last week. What's his name? Good-looking guy. Hey, you guys actually dated for a while back. His name's kind of different sounding name.
Oh, you mean Jolin.
Yeah, that's him.
Yeah.
That guy. Did you see what this guy was wearing?
I did.
Yeah, I mean, this guy comes in here and, he walks in wearing this $3,500 suit. I mean, come on. Who does that? And then he's wearing these designer shades in the sanctuary when it's dark. Who does that?
I don't know, but I
This guy
thought
thinks
he
he
looked
is.
really good. He was really well put together.
Yeah, and then okay, what was up with this guy's hair, right? It's all what is it? What do you even call that?
That's called messy in place, okay? He has to look the part now. He is a CEO of a big company.
Yeah.
So he has to act like it
Yeah,
and dress
CEO.
like it. I thought he did good.
Yeah. CEO, that's funny.
Yeah. CEO.
Seriously?
Sir.
Like an actual CEO?
CEO.
Well, I mean, how old is this guy anyway?
35 maybe. I know he has his MBA already.
MBA. No, that's totally the wrong way to go about it. I'm all about you start at the bottom of the company and you pay your dues and you work your way up to the top. And who needs to spend all this money on a fancy education? You can learn all of that in life.
Well, apparently he took a different approach than you did. He wanted to shoot straight for the top, so he worked really hard, and now he looks really good,
Yeah.
That's not to say that, this wonderful outfit isn't making its own statement, Greg.
Oh yeah, no, this is totally in vogue right now. Do you know that I actually got this at the Relive thrift store? It's only $2. Only $2. Can you believe that? A steal like this? And it's totally trendy. It's amazing.
It's something.
And at least I'm not like this guy, walking in and announcing hey everybody, come see how good I look.
Now, Greg, do I detect a tinge of envy in your voice?
No, I'm not envious at all. I'm just saying he's tooting his horn a little bit too much, don't you think?
I don't think so. Why can't you just be happy for the guy, So he's doing really well and he's well-to-do. But, he's worked really hard for it.
Yeah, well, I could tell he wanted everyone to know that he was well-to-do. I mean, just look how he drove away from church in his fancy little Mercedes-Benz convertible and just sped away.
Greg, you're tearing this guy down. You're not jealous of his car, are you?
Jesse, oh dear Jesse, why would I be jealous of his Mercedes-Benz when I drive what I drive?
Wait, you mean the red Dodge Stratus?
Yeah, 1998 red Dodge Stratus SL with Texas plates.
Brother Greg, you know what? Why can't you just admit it? You are so envious of this guy.
So when was the last time you turned green with envy? When was the last time you burned with jealousy? Now, I'm going to guess that some of you will say, oh, that was way back, college, maybe even high school. That was way back when, not anymore. Well, maybe so, but maybe you can relate to the story of the preacher, teacher, and writer Chuck Swindoll. Swindoll tells of the time when he had just begun to date the woman who would become his wife. They were just becoming friendly. They had not entered into a mutually exclusive relationship yet, but he really liked her. Had some pangs of jealousy at times, really liked her. And then another guy invited her to go with him to the college football game, and she accepted. Now, they were going to go to the game of the Texas Aggies, Texas A&M University football team. Now, I don't know if you've been to a college football game, but college football games usually have their traditions. A fairly common tradition at certain colleges is that the students stand for the entire game. I've been there, University of Texas, standing for 3 hours. They all have their traditions. Well, it just so happened that at that time, the Texas A&M University Aggies had a tradition that every time their team scored, the guys in the stands who had brought a girl on a date would kiss her. Now, Swindoll knew the tradition, and he was deeply worried. He said, man, that upset me like nothing. He said, I started praying right away that they wouldn't score, that they would be just shut out. There would be no score on the team. But he said, I listened to that game on the radio. And he said, the Aggies won 48-0. 48-0. He said, it was like a virtual makeout session. What in the world? He said, I was eaten up with jealousy of this guy and the girl I liked. So what about you? When was the last time you turned green with envy, burned with jealousy? Now, just in case you say, well, that was a long time ago. That was back when we were kids. I don't do that anymore. When you become adult, you put those things behind you. Just in case that's you. The writer Peggy Noonan tells the story of being in a Manhattan skyscraper. She was there to interview a CEO for part of a piece that she was writing. This was the CEO of a large and very well-known American company. She said, there I was in his office with floor-to-ceiling windows all the way across the office. As I stood there and looked out at those windows, all of those sun-kissed skyscrapers reaching toward the sky, it looked surreal. It looked so beautiful that it almost seemed fake, like the scrim in a movie. But there we were, surveying the scenery of Manhattan. And we fell into conversation, she said, interviewing this CEO. At one point in the interview, she said, he said something that piqued my curiosity, caught my attention. He said, this is the annual report time of year when all of us CEOs and all of these different companies, he said with a sweep of his hand, all of us turn the details in and out come the reports. It's a time we all look forward to. Really? She asked, why is that? Well, he said, we just want to see what's happening in all the other companies. We want to see what's going on. And he said, we're especially eager to turn to the back of the report. Why? Well, he said, in the back of the report is the information about what the CEOs are getting, what's in their package, what they're making, what the bennies are. The corporate jets, the private helicopters, those kinds of things. He looked at Peggy Noonan and said, that's what's really interesting to us. We all want to know what the others are getting. So what about it? From young people in love to CEOs of powerful companies. When was the last time you turned green with envy? You burned with jealousy? Be careful to think that just the passing of years will make you immune to that, because the long, spiny, bony fingers of envy and jealousy can reach a long way. And so today in our series, we come to a discussion of envy and jealousy. Now, just to set the table again, because were you here last week? Oh, that's right, I wasn't here. I almost added another sermon entitled How to Deal with the Stomach Flu, but I'll leave that to others. We're in a series that's simply entitled Dangers, Toils, and Snares. You remember that passage in Hebrews, coming out of Hebrews, the 11th chapter, that chapter of faith, where of one figure after another it is said that they lived by faith. Coming out of that chapter, beginning chapter 12, the writer says, now, seeing that we have such a great cloud of witnesses, all of these people who have lived by faith, seeing we have such a great cloud of witnesses, he says, let us then throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with patience the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. And so it is that reality, those things that so easily entangle us, the sin that so easily besets us, that we're considering in this series. We're taking a thoughtful, a biblical look at some of the most common ones. We've considered pride and anger and fear, and today we come to jealousy and envy. Now, you notice that I'm using both terms, so maybe we ought to define terms to begin with. Are jealousy and envy the same thing? Are they different? How are they related? Well, truth be told, almost no matter what source you look at, jealousy and envy are deeply intertwined. They are very much related. But maybe a helpful way to think about their differences is to think like this. Most often, jealousy is selfishly and sometimes obsessively concerned about protecting what is mine. This is mine. I don't want you to have any of it. It turns inward as it holds on. On the other hand, envy is often expressed by selfishly and sometimes obsessively desiring and even seeking to possess what is yours. I look at you and I see something in your life, in your world, in your home that I want and like, and I become envious and I want to draw it to myself. Listen to how one writer writes of these two realities, these twin realities. He says, what exactly is envy? How does it differ from its twin, jealousy? Envy is the more sophisticated of the two, and it's a painful and resentful awareness of an advantage enjoyed by another, accompanied by a strong desire to possess the same advantage. Envy wants to have what someone else possesses. Jealousy wants to possess what it already has. Jealousy is coarse and cruel. Envy is sneaky and subtle. Jealousy clutches and smothers. Envy is forever reaching, longing, squinting, thinking, and speaking sinister insinuations. Do you know that jealousy came to church this morning? You may have to look to be sure you recognize and see jealousy, but jealousy is here today. You might see jealousy in the over-possessiveness of a boyfriend of his girlfriend. You might see jealousy in the baseless insinuations of one spouse about another. You might see jealousy in the struggle between two parents, each wanting to be the favorite in their child's eyes. You might see jealousy in the strong sibling rivalry that happens between brother and sister as they seek to have the best place. I don't know where you will see it, but I am confident that jealousy sneaked in the door this morning. But jealousy didn't come alone. Envy also came to church this morning, but envy is harder to spot. It's much more subtle, much more refined, much more sophisticated. But if you look, you will see envy. You will see envy in the furtive, lingering glance at another man's wife. You will see envy in the carefully crafted compliment that actually is a criticism. You will see envy in the muffled congratulations of a friend who has done well. Oh, envy is here as well, but a bit harder to recognize. So the question becomes, when we come to church, walk in to worship God, and suddenly realize that envy and jealousy have slipped in almost unnoticed, the question is, does God have a word? Is there a word from the Lord? Does our divine guide have something to offer us about these realities that so easily beset us? The answer is yes. I want to take you to two passages of Scripture this morning. We begin by going to the Old Testament book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 14. While you're turning to Proverbs 14, I want to add a disclaimer. I want to point out that not all jealousy is bad. In fact, there is some jealousy that is legitimate and to be expected. If you take your Scripture and you read the Bible, especially the Old Testament stories, you will encounter a jealous God. You ask, why is He jealous? The reason is simple. Because God had entered into a mutually exclusive relationship expected to be faithful with the nation of Israel. But every time Israel went wandering off after other gods, God's heart would be hurt and abandonment would set in and God would feel jealous. At times, jealousy is a symbol of love that has been somehow damaged or threatened. But having said that, that's not the jealousy we consider this morning. No, what we're about to read of in this one pithy, pungent proverb is a jealousy that can be very damaging. Now, I want you to notice as we read this very brief proverb what the wise man is doing. He is setting two emotional realities in opposition to each other. On the one side, he puts peace, that blessed experience. And on the other side, he puts envy or jealousy, depending on the translation you read. And then he points out what each of these two experiences leads to. So read it with me. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30. He writes this: "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Now, the New Living Translation renders that second phrase, but jealousy is like a cancer in the bones. So even the translators wrestled with precisely what the Old Testament writer was addressing. Was he addressing that jealousy that smothers and wants to contain what is mine? Or was he addressing that envy that looks out and wants to grab what's yours? Or did he recognize that they were so closely related that he could actually be talking about both? Envy, he says, sets in and it rots the bones. It's like a cancer in the bones. It destroys the internal life. The spirit is killed. Do you wonder about that? Then witness Cain's burning anger as he sees Abel's burning sacrifice. Witness Leah's jilted feelings as she looks at Rachel, the more beloved. Witness what happens in the experience of that conniving queen and her husband, the king, named Ahab. Ahab, who turns his face to the wall and weeps like a petulant teenager and wails out, "Naboth won't sell me his vineyard." And then his conniving queen of a wife, Jezebel, with a steely spine and a steely resolve, says to him, "Stop your whining. I will give it to you." Witness story after story after story in Scripture where jealousy and envy rotted the inner life and often then reached out and did severe damage to others in that world. Or even witness our day and time. Do you wonder if jealousy and envy are like a cancer in the bones? Then witness the classmate who is consumed with the other classmate who always is just a little bit ahead, just a little bit higher in the class standing. And every time the grades come out, there's a smoldering fire that smothers life. Witness the jealous husband. He does things that most thinking people would never do. Checking the odometer. How many miles did she drive today? Obsessively checking the phone bill. Who is she calling? Obsessively watching and waiting and wondering, hoping to catch her in something so that his jealousy will have a purpose. And ask yourself, what about the life of that marriage? Is it vibrant? Or is there a cancer in the bones? Maybe it would be helpful to understand a little bit about what creates jealousy and envy. Jealousy is created by feelings of inferiority, feelings of insecurity. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I don't measure up. I'm not strong enough, not rich enough, not beautiful enough, not whatever enough, so that suddenly what I have is threatened when somebody shows up who is all of those things, and I want to grab on to what's mine and possess it. Jealousy is often created by inferiority and insecurity. Envy, on the other hand, is often created by dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction with what one has and with who one is. I don't have enough. I need more. I need what they have. I want what they have. I want to look like that and drive that car. I'm dissatisfied with what I have. And those realities, insecurity and dissatisfaction, have the ability to create within us an emotional hunger that demands satisfaction. Emotional hunger is what an acquaintance of mine calls it. Emotional hunger, it's that experience that one has when you haven't been tending to your own garden, to your own house, to your own relationships, to your own marriage, to your own relationship with God, so that there is created within you a vacuum that can be characterized by saying it's emotional hunger. And when I am emotionally hungry, I am at great risk. After all, ask yourself the question, when was the last time you went grocery shopping when you were hungry? I can tell you exactly what it's like for me. Anita may send me out to run and get something down at the grocery store, just one or two items. I need it for what I'm baking. Can you run and get it? Off I go. But the one thing she hasn't taken into account is I'm hungry. It's amazing what happens in that grocery store. As I walk down those aisles, I say, oh, that looks good. In it go, that really looks good. In that go, that looks good. And pretty soon, I'm loading that thing up. I go through the checkout stand, have to push the cart out, too many bags, get home, and I come in with all those, and she looks and says, what is that? I sent you for one or two things. Oh, yeah, but look what they had here. Look what they had there. What are you going to do? What army are you planning to feed? Are you planning to defeat them by a sugar haze? What did you do? Well, the answer is very simple. Oh, I was just hungry. And it just looked so good. Have you ever been there? Emotionally hungry, feeling insecure, feeling dissatisfied. It predisposes you to decisions just as unwise about your life as you might make that are unwise about your groceries if you are hungry. So, says the Old Testament writer, it becomes like a cancer in the bones. The jealousy, the envy that drives you to think things, to say things, to do things that are not characteristic of either a mature person or of a follower of Christ. So the question then is, what do we do if we walked into worship this morning emotionally hungry? If we walked in and somehow jealously slipped in beside us, envy sat down on the pew next to us, what do we do? For that, I take you to a second passage of Scripture, this one in the New Testament, the writing of Paul that we call Philippians. Philippians chapter 4. Now, while you're turning to Philippians 4, I have to tell you that if any situation was tailor-made, ready-made to be emotionally hungry, if any circumstance was tailor-made to experience envy and jealousy, it would have to be the circumstance of the Apostle Paul when he wrote the letter to the Philippians. Because when Paul wrote his letter to the Philippians, he was chained in a Roman prison. His future was in question. His liberty was a reality of yesterday. How easy it would be to sit in that prison and wonder, why are all the others home, free, able to sleep in their own homes, be with their own families, worship in their own places of worship, and here I sit languishing with an uncertain future in a prison cell. Is that a situation to create emotional angst and envy and jealousy? Absolutely. So what stuns me is that when you read Philippians, you discover the most joyful letter Paul ever wrote. It literally overflows with joy. When I read that, my first question is, why? Why is he happy? How? How does he achieve that? Well, here in the 4th chapter, he's going to answer that question. While he never mentions envy, never mentions jealousy, he does give us the answer. So I want to read it with you, Philippians 4, beginning in verse 10. Notice what he writes. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. In that passage, Paul tells us what to do if we are emotionally hungry, if envy and jealousy have crowded their way into our hearts. First of all, I want you to notice this. What he is in essence saying there is that our inner emotional life does not need to depend on our outer physical life. That it does not need to depend on what's happening out there as to what's going on in here. Now that's very different from most of us. Because for most of us, our level of happiness and satisfaction and well-being is directly tied to our circumstances. Consider, for example, what some researchers found. They started back in the 1992 Barcelona Olympics to track this and have continued up to the most recent Olympics and have made a rather interesting discovery. Here's what it is. It is made evident in the statements of 2 American athletes, both of them swimmers, but in this case, the statements were made at 2 different events. I want you to listen to their words. First of all, the words of Ryan Lochte. Many of you will remember Ryan Lochte as we watched the most recent Olympics. This came just after the 4x100 meter freestyle relay in London at the 2012 Olympics. And he said this apologetically. Listen to what he said. It's not my normal specialty. We went out there and raced tough, but we just came up a little short. That's the first statement. Second statement made by Brendan Hansen. Just seconds after he completed the 100-meter men's breaststroke finals, Hansen said this with a beaming face. Listen to his words. I swam my own race, he said. I knew I had a lane and I had an opportunity and I went for it. It worked out, and it's just awesome that I got to the podium tonight. Honestly, I'm really proud of myself. A rather marked difference between the two. Now, here's what the researchers noted time and time and time again. Lochte made his statement at the moment he won silver, second place. Hansen made his ebullient statement at the moment he won bronze, third place. In fact, Hansen went on to say this. This is the shiniest bronze medal you will ever see, ever. He was that happy. Do you know what the researchers found? They found that across sports, throughout the different Olympics they have studied, time and time and time again, the bronze winner was much happier than the silver winner. Why, they asked. Why is that the case? Their hypothesis, very simple. Because the silver winner is saying, I just missed it. I could have had gold. And the bronze winner is saying, I just made it. I got to the podium. I'm here. I can't believe it. But both underline the fact that time and again, our inner life is determined by our outer life. Paul says just the opposite. Paul says the reality is your inner emotional life need not be determined by your outer physical circumstances. And he gives us two reasons for which that is the case here in Philippians 4. The first reason that Paul can say that is simply this, because Paul can say, I am loved. I am loved beyond imagination. I am loved beyond life itself. I am loved beyond any reason to explain it. Two ways that's true in Paul's life. First of all, what he directly says in this passage. Twice he mentions the concern that his Philippian brothers and sisters have for him. He says, you have shown me your concern. I know I didn't need it. You've tried it before, you couldn't do it, but at last you've been able to express your concern for me. And he's talking about that in the context of a loving relationship of mutuality. But if we broaden that to include all of Paul's writings, then make no mistake about it, he will say, I am loved. I am convinced of a love from which nothing can separate me. I am loved. So whether or not I have all I want, whether or not others around me have more than I have, and I might wish for what they have, whether all of that may be true, on one thing I can rest: I am loved. Second thing Paul says is, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I can face any setting, any situation, any circumstance through the one who empowers me. So no matter how tough the road might go, how inadequate I can feel, how insecure I might be, how dissatisfied my circumstances might be, I need not shrink back, says Paul, because I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Now for Paul, those two realities, I am loved, I can do all things, is the chemotherapy for the cancer that eats at our bones, the jealousy and the envy. Why? Because it leads to one experience. He uses one word to describe it, and that word is this: contentment. Contentment. He says, I have learned the secret of being content in any and every circumstance. I can still remember standing with a good friend of mine at the Dallas Cowboys training camp when we were just out of college. We looked at these guys. Back then, you could get right up close to them. We were standing there. He was a bit shorter than I, when one of the players walked right in front of us, one of the big players, and we stood there like two little boys gawking as this guy walked by, muscles bulging, no neck. We watched him walk by. And my friend, as we watched him walk away, said under his breath, I'll never feel like a man again. And I knew exactly what he felt. Well, you know what Paul says? You can be in circumstances just like that, where everyone is better, has more, outshines you. And yet you can remember, I am loved. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. So I can be content. Content. That's the answer to envy and jealousy. Contentment. It's a reality that God can give to you today. He can place it in your hands. He can invade your heart with his love and his reassurance so that you know profound contentment. That's the reality. When envy comes to church, when jealousy sits down in the pew beside you, just open your heart and say, oh God, reassure me that I am loved and that I can sit here next to jealousy and envy and be content. Danny Simpson, 24 years old, up in Ottawa, Canada, took a handgun one day, some years back, about 1990 if I'm not mistaken, took a handgun, a .45 semi-automatic, and went into a bank. Danny wanted more out of life. He wanted more than what he had. Needed more, he was convinced. So he would go in and by force, he would get that which he envied, that about which he was jealous. He would get it by force. It would be his. Life would be better to him. So that's what Danny did. Went into the bank, .45 semi-automatic, held up the bank. The cashier did what cashiers are apparently trained to do, handed over the cash that was available, and Danny made his exit, $6,000 in cash. Not a bad haul. But unfortunately for Danny, law enforcement has ways of doing things, and it wasn't too long before Danny was under arrest. Didn't matter now the $6,000. They would later convict him, and he would go to prison to serve time for the robbery. But it was as they went through Danny's things that they made a rather interesting discovery. That semi-automatic .45 had been made by the Ross Rifle Company in Quebec City in 1918. That .45 semi-automatic with which Danny got what he wanted from life was worth about $100,000. And so it was that Danny did what so many of us do. With the answer in our hands, we set about to destroy lives, trying to get that. Paul says, it's in your hand, can be in your heart. It's what God offers you today. You are loved. You can do all things through Him who gives you strength. So today, don't give envy or jealousy a ride home. Leave them here and go home to enjoy the contentment Jesus provides.